We're in the Endgame now. What's going on, guys? Well, with the release of Avengers Endgame finally this weekend, like I told you in my spoiler-free review, I'm also going to be doing a spoiler-filled discussion, which will either be later on tonight or possibly even tomorrow if time gets away from me. But now it's time for my MCU ranking. Time to update this bitch. Now we got 22 films to talk about. That is insane, just to wrap your mind around. 11 years, 22 films. This is one of the coolest and most jam-packed franchises that I've ever seen. And like I've said in my previous rankings, the amazing thing is there's not a single movie on this list that I dislike. There's some mediocre ones for sure towards the bottom, like the bottom 5, but there's not a single movie on this list that I think is trashed, garbage, or even just passably like, don't watch it at all. No, the MCU is 22 films that are all good to fantastic. So, with that being said, starting off at 22. Some things in this list have changed a little bit. I have been able to rewatch a couple of films since my previous ranking just a couple months ago with Captain Marvel. So one or two shifts a little bit, but for the most part, a lot of my thoughts are still the same. And this is no exception. 22, the worst film in the MCU, while still being pretty good, is Iron Man 2. The big problem with this movie is that it's like two halves. The first half is a really good Iron Man sequel. The second half just goes a little bit bananas. There's all kinds of different ideas going on here. You got Whiplash, you got Justin Hammer, you have a setup for the Avengers, and the whole movie ends up feeling like a bunch of jumbled ideas that got thrown together. It got rushed into production, which is no secret. Jon Favreau had like 2 years to make this and he wanted 3. And it ends up feeling like a giant commercial to the Avengers for me. So in the end, this is the most unsuccessful Marvel film while still being a very watchable Iron Man sequel. 22, Iron Man 2. Number 21 is Thor: The Dark World. This tends to be on the bottom of most people's lists. I give it a little bit of an edge over Iron Man 2 because at least to me, this movie feels like a focused Thor movie. It might jumble a few too many storylines. It might have the most boring villain in the entire MCU. It definitely is not to the caliber of Thor and certainly not Thor Ragnarok, but it's still an enjoyable sequel. I still like going to Asgard. I like seeing Loki and Thor kind of team up in certain aspects. So I still get enjoyment out of Thor: The Dark World, while it is one of the most unsuccessful films in the MCU. So 21, no argument here, Thor: The Dark World. And now we start the controversy. 20. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. You will see later on, I am a huge fan of the original Guardians of the Galaxy. This sequel dropped the ball quite a bit for me, and I've rewatched it a couple of times. Every rewatch, I like it slightly less. There's still some of the same things that I like about Guardians of the Galaxy, the characters, the character interactions, that sense of fun is still there here and there, but this movie is full-on James Gunn, where it is just very dark and a little bit weird of a tonal shift between fun, goofy Guardians of the Galaxy, and then you get to Ego, and he's murdering his children, and he put cancer in Quill's mother, and like all kinds of crazy stuff that is just some of the darkest, grimmest, most brutal stuff in the MCU. It just doesn't fit. You know, there's things about that. I don't feel like the humor is as sharp. I don't feel like the interaction with the Guardians of the Galaxy is as magical as it was in the first one. Yondu, the best part of the movie for me, and then if you know the end of the movie, his fate is a little bit disappointing for me. There's things regarding Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 that I just think were big missteps. So I still enjoy it. It's still a decent enough movie, but it is towards the bottom of my list where it's very high up on a lot of other lists. So number 20, Volume 2, Guardians of the Galaxy. 19, another kind of unpopular opinion, Doctor Strange. This is the first movie in the MCU where I could really feel the Marvel formula. I saw this movie and it just felt like about 5 other MCU movies that I've seen before. And this was the first time that it actually hit me. I do like Benedict Cumberbatch in the role. I do like the visuals, and I do like the different world that they open up with Doctor Strange and all the possibilities that it kind of brings into the MCU, and I think they've utilized him well in Infinity War and Endgame, so I like the potential of this character, but just to me, it's the formula. It's the formulaic approach of this story. It basically feels exactly like an Iron Man movie, but with Doctor Strange and all the weirdness that comes along with that. So still a good enough movie. I still enjoy it decent enough, but it's formulaic. Doctor Strange, 19. Number 18, one of the newcomers, Captain Marvel. This is the most probably basic Marvel film here as far as it just delivers exactly what you expect it to deliver and absolutely nothing more. I love Nick Fury in this movie. He's by far the best part about it, and Samuel L. Jackson. The de-aging and everything was fantastic. Brie Larson's okay in the role. I think that, you know, I never had an issue with all the controversy surrounding her, so I wasn't one of those guys that was walking in wanting to hate her. I gave her a fair chance. I think she's just okay. I don't think she really brings anything that, like, Robert Downey Jr. brings, or Chris Evans brings, or if you want to go into female characters, even characters like Valkyrie or Black Widow, like there's just no pop to her character. I don't understand what the hell her powers are. Even with seeing Endgame, I don't understand what the hell her powers are. It's just a very basic, run-of-the-mills, Marvel formula churned out origin story, which is still decent enough and better than a lot of superhero movies out there, but nowhere near the top tier of the MCU. So Captain Marvel, 18. Number 17. Now from here on up, these are movies that I really don't have a whole lot negative to say about it. I got Ant-Man and the Wasp at 17. And the Ant-Man movies to me are just fine, enjoyable MCU movies. They're not trying to be anything bigger than they are. And that's totally cool because they execute exactly what they promise. Ant-Man and the Wasp, a lot of cool action scenes. I like the interaction with Ant-Man and the Wasp. I love seeing Michael Douglas back. The whole thing about the quantum realm and kind of diving into that a little bit. You get Michelle Pfeiffer thrown in there. A decent enough villain, pretty interesting villain, which has been a struggle for Marvel for quite a few years that they're starting to kind of rein themselves in with a little bit. It's an enjoyable movie. It's not nearly as epic or awesome or stand out as some of the movies above it, which is the reason why it's this low on this list. But being this low on this list, like I said, this is the first movie from here on out that I would fully recommend to everybody. Comic book fan, MCU fan, movie fan. It's an enjoyable film. Number 16, another point of controversy, unfortunately, and that's Spider-Man Homecoming. Now again, this is on the list of movies that I would recommend, but I am a huge, unapologetic fanatic of the Sam Raimi trilogy. Yes, even Spider-Man 3. It has its flaws, but I still love that movie. Tobey Maguire, everything that Raimi did, that's my version of Spider-Man. That's what I grew up with. And Spider-Man Homecoming, despite having a lot of great things about it, I do love Tom Holland in the role. I love Tony Stark as this kind of mentor character. I love Michael Keaton as the Vulture. It's everything surrounding Spider-Man that I really did not enjoy in this film, and I enjoyed it even less upon rewatch. All of his friends and the high school characters, including Flash Thompson, didn't really like any of them. The new version of MJ, a very strange interpretation of that character, but we'll see. Maybe they'll pull that in with Far From Home. You get to just the way that the high school interaction thing goes. You get the Spider-Man suit. I also didn't like that. Basically, Iron Man Spider-Man suit. Spider-Man does not need technology to be a great superhero. Spider-Man is special enough on his own, so just the fact that he has all this like utility belt of Tony Stark technology kind of took away from the character a bit for me. I don't know, it's a movie that I enjoy, but it just does not measure up to what I expect from a Spider-Man film. So maybe that's unfair expectations on my part, I'll fully own that, but Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi trilogy, is what I expect from a Spider-Man trilogy and what I expect from a Spider-Man movie, and Spider-Man Homecoming went in the huge different departure, which they probably should have done. Some of the elements they went with just does not work for me, but it's still about halfway up this list. Number 15, Avengers Age of Ultron. This movie tends to get shit on a lot, and I gotta be honest, I don't understand why. I think it's clearly the weakest of the 4 Avengers films, but it's still a damn good film. It's still a damn good comic book film, and it's still in the upper half of the MCU as far as I'm concerned. There's so many great character moments here. A lot of the magic that was there in the Avengers is still here. It's just not as magical because it's not the first time we see it all come together like in the original Avengers. I think that Ultron was the only pretty big misstep in this because they kind of market him as this really sinister villain, and you get to the movie and he's more jokey and more a little bit like a nefarious version of Tony Stark a little bit. It was a weird version of that character, and that's one of those times when I think that the humor of the MCU kind of gets in their way a bit. But the action sequences are great. I love the Hulkbuster scene, the whole sequence at the end when everybody's fighting all the different little Ultron minions. I think it's a damn good comic book film. Not perfect by any means. There's certainly some things in there that you could feel Joss Whedon's exhaustion a little bit, but it's still a damn good film in my opinion. So Avengers Age of Ultron, this is where you go. Number 14, the little guy on the list, Ant-Man. This movie actually, I was kind of mediocre, kind of a little bit lukewarm on it when I first saw it. Upon rewatch, I've enjoyed this movie more and more for what it is, a little heist film within the MCU. Again, just like Ant-Man and the Wasp, not trying to be anything more than what it is, and I like that. I respect that. It's not trying to be this big epic thing. It's not trying to be this huge addition to the MCU. It's just a fun little chapter that you can go in. Some of the MCU formula in there, but not nearly as present as films like Doctor Strange. I like all the shrinking and the growing special effects. I like the final battle, even though the villain is kind of like not so much a generic villain, but he is a formulaic villain, and I just want that suit, that's mine, I'm gonna take over the world. So I like Corey Stoll in the role, but in the same time, he's not like one of the grandest villains, but I feel like he fits the movie. I like the look of his suit as Yellow Jacket. I like the final battle on the Thomas train and everything. This is just a fun movie, and you gotta love Michael Pena. So there you go. Number 13, this movie moved down a couple of spots for me because I rewatched it and I still really enjoyed this film, but I gotta be honest, all the praise that it gets constantly as far as Oscar buzz and everything does make me look at it in a different light to where I'm like, come on, there's some flaws here you guys are ignoring. Black Panther, still a great film. Don't unsubscribe or, send hate or call me a racist or anything like that, even though I'm sure there's probably one or two down there. Black Panther is still a great film. It's up here. It's in the top half of this list. And like I said, these are all great. Black Panther does a great job at introducing this new character of Black Panther to this world. It does an amazing job with world building. Has really good characters like his sister, like pretty much everybody in Wakanda. I forget her name, Danae something. The chick who plays Michonne, she's a great character. You get really great villains like Killmonger, even though I would have liked to seen more from him. I even like Claw quite a bit. Some really cool fight sequences in the first half of the film. The last half, I think that the CGI gets in the way a little bit, but I really enjoy Wakanda, its addition to the MCU, and a lot of the character interactions. Where this movie fails a little bit for me is that it feels a little bit Marvel formula. It feels like kind of a superhero version of The Lion King, so you kind of see the writing on the wall where all the story is going. The CGI does get very mediocre in certain spots, especially the big final battle. It is noticeably terrible compared to how great the special effects are in some of the other MCU films. And I think that there's some room for Killmonger to have been an even greater villain than he was, just with how he was utilized. It feels like the movie needed a little bit more Killmonger in it, a little bit more diving into his past, what created this character, versus just telling us, this is why he is, this is why he's evil, moving on. No, show us. So Black Panther, damn good comic book film, totally important, totally relevant to today's age. I understand completely why people lost their shit about it, and they should have. But not quite Oscar caliber, not quite Best Picture caliber, and to me, not the top of the MCU. So hopefully that's fair enough. Number 12, this is one that I think gets unfairly shit on quite a bit. It's like the black sheep of the MCU, and that is The Incredible Hulk. This is the one film in this franchise that doesn't really feel like a part of the MCU whatsoever. That's not the movie's fault, it's just when it came out, it was kind of a half and half deal between Paramount and the Marvel Studios, and they don't have the rights to make these movies anymore, so it just kind of feels like it's the forgotten chapter. You get Edward Norton, who I think is damn good in the role of Bruce Banner. I even prefer him to Mark Ruffalo, as great as Mark Ruffalo is. You get a lot of awesome Hulk action, a lot of great Hulk drama. You get the whole thing between Hulk and the Abomination, that whole final fight. This movie just has some badass stuff, and I like it a lot because it feels standalone. It doesn't feel like it has the burden of being a part of a gigantic universe like some films on this list, and certainly some films like in the DCEU tend to get strained by a little bit. This feels like a Hulk movie. And if I can be honest, aside from some great things that they did in Thor Ragnarok and some great things they did in the first Avengers, the Hulk has not been utilized very well in this universe, and the Incredible Hulk, this standalone film, utilized him the best. So if you're a fan of the Hulk, there's no reason not to like this film. So I think it's very underrated. I think that it's very underappreciated with this MCU, and I'm putting it high up on this list because to me, it deserves it. So The Incredible Hulk, there you go. Hulk smash! 11 is Captain America, the First Avenger. I actually rewatched this yesterday. I haven't rewatched it in quite a while because I tend to put on Winter Soldier or Civil War a little bit more often. But this is a really great origin story. It's a great period piece. It's a great war style film. I really enjoy this a lot. I love the character of Steve Rogers. I like how they kind of get you introduced to him through his moral code and just him doing whatever he can to get into the army, even though he knows he'd probably be killed in 5 seconds. He's just the moral code of there's no reason why I should not put forth the effort to go and give my life for the country when all these other men are. God, I love Steve Rogers. Just everything about that character is what drives his 3 films. It's the most character that I identify with the most in the Avengers. It's the character that I really enjoy watching the most and I want to see prevail the most. I like the relationship a lot between him and Agent Carter, probably the best romantic interest in the entire MCU, even better than Tony and Pepper. I really like the action sequences. I think that Red Skull is a pretty good villain, but he is kind of falling victim to that generic Nazi, world dominator kind of thing. We've seen that villain 1,000 times since Raiders of the Lost Ark, so aside from his cool look and aside from being played by a great actor, it's not really a villain that stands out so much, and I feel like there was more they could have done with that character throughout the MCU. But it's really enjoyable origin story. It does montage through World War II a little bit too fast. It is more interesting in the first half than the second half, but I think it's a really good origin story. That's why it's up here. Number 10 is a movie that I rewatched and on my previous ranking jumped up quite a few spaces upon rewatch, and that's the original Thor. I think this is a very underappreciated movie in the MCU. I had no interest in Thor when it first came out in 2009, 2010. I didn't care for the character. I didn't have any interest in, the Lord of the Rings in the MCU, or it just didn't appeal to me at all. I didn't give the movie a very fair shot when I first saw it. I didn't really grow to love the character of Thor until I saw him in the Avengers movies. And I rewatched the original Thor, and this is a damn good Shakespearean style, family drama focused origin story. I love the drama between Odin and Thor, between Thor and Loki, between Odin and Loki. Everything on Asgard I think is incredible. I love the whole opening half hour where Thor is just this arrogant dickhead, and when he goes to confront the frost giants and he gets ready to walk away and they call him like a baby or something, and he's like, and Loki's like, oh fuck. That whole sequence when Odin comes in to stop him and he's like, Father, we'll take them on together, and he goes, silence. Everything about that. When you get to Earth, the movie does falter a little bit. The Asgardian stuff is much better than the Earth stuff, and it's because the writing surrounding the Earth characters. Kat Dennings, even a great actress like Natalie Portman, there's never really been a whole lot of chemistry between her and Thor. And I don't blame it on the actors because these are all world-class actors. Maybe not Kat Dennings, but Thor or Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman on paper should work perfectly, but they really don't. But the Earth stuff is still fun. That fish out of water with Thor. I'm tired of talking about Thor. You should give it another chance. That's the thing I'm saying. Thor is much better than people give it credit for, and I think it's a damn good origin story, and it's up here at number 10. Number 9, hit it. Iron Man, the original Iron Man. I actually rewatched this yesterday as well for the first time in quite a few years, and this movie really does hold up. It's amazing how much it built the character of Iron Man, brought back credibility to Robert Downey Jr., set up very subtly this universe to be explored, which they have explored the hell out of. It's a great action film, it's a great character film, it's a great Marvel film, it's a great origin story. There's not a whole lot negative you could say about Iron Man other than Ironmonger, not necessarily the greatest villain in the world. It definitely has, when you look back on it, a simple formula to it, but it was the one that started the formula, so you can't hold it against it for following that formula. But it's just a great movie. There's not a whole lot else you could say about Iron Man that hasn't been said over the past 11 years. Robert Downey Jr. knocks it out of the park. All the character interactions, I actually like Terrence Howard as Rhodey a little bit more than I like Don Cheadle, so he's great in this. Pepper Potts is great. Of course, you got Jeff Bridges. He's a great actor, so he plays a really good villain. It's just the villain by the end seems a little bit standard, but he's still a cool villain. Great third act, great final battle and everything. I love Iron Man. So what else can you say about it? Number 9. Number 8, time to dodge bullets. Iron Man 3. Yes, I have it above Iron Man. I've had it above Iron Man for every ranking that I've ever done, so you shouldn't be surprised. But let me defend myself. I am a gigantic Shane Black fan, save for the Predator. But I think the dude's writing is incredible. I think every movie that he's directed has been great, except for the Predator. But this is a great Shane Black, Tony Stark film. Does it fit the MCU as much as some of the other films? Not quite. Is it the movie that a lot of Iron Man fans were expecting? Not quite. Is there things in this that are very risky and don't quite pay off for hardcore comic book fans? Not quite. But if you're not a part of those expectations and you walk in and you get this great Shane Black dialogue-driven Iron Man film where Tony Stark is stripped of his armor and has to survive as Tony Stark. He's dealing with the PTSD of the events of the Avengers. You've got a really great storyline involving the Extremis Project, really great villains in my opinion, which is a point of controversy with this film that I totally understand with the Mandarin. All the setup with the Mandarin was incredible. You get to this twist. For me, it's an entertaining, funny, little goofy twist that works because I'm not somebody that has all these years of the Mandarin built in my brain of what he should be. If you're a comic book fan and that ruins the character for you, I totally get it. I'm just not one of those people, so you can understand my perspective, hopefully. And I even like Guy Pearce as a villain quite a bit. So this is a film that I think is very underrated in the MCU, while I understand that the ballsy risks that it takes does turn off quite a few people, understandably. But I'm just not one of those people. It works for me. I love it to death, and it is my favorite Iron Man film. Number 7, Thor Ragnarok. This is one that was really surprising for me because at this point when I saw this, I still wasn't 100% on the Thor camp. Like, I liked him in the Avengers movies, but I hadn't really rewatched Thor. Thor the Dark World was still near the bottom of my MCU list. You see Thor Ragnarok, and this is the movie that feels like it fully realizes the potential and the strengths of Chris Hemsworth in this role. His comedic timing, his delivery, the interaction between him and the Hulk. The Hulk has been utilized really well in this film, better than he is in some of the other Avengers films, and certainly better than he is in a film we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. But this is a great Thor Hulk like buddy cop adventure film type of deal. I love the whole gladiator match that goes on. I like Jeff Goldblum in this little goofy role. It has a little bit of Guardians of the Galaxy style flavor to it, which works very well with the character of Thor. So it's just a blast, straight to start to finish. The soundtrack's great, the action's great, the characters are great. I have a blast with Thor Ragnarok. I loved it even more watching it at home than I did in the theaters, and I was pretty happy with it in the theaters. So very high on this list. Number 6 is Avengers Infinity War. Now, I really enjoyed this film when it first came out. I enjoyed it upon rewatch. I think it does a damn good job at juggling how much it's supposed to juggle, all the different characters, all the setup, all the world building, all the Thanos building, all the explanation and like gathering of the different Infinity Stones, all the huge action sequences, the dramatic stuff. It does a damn good job juggling all of that. There's some really memorable scenes. There's some really great character interactions with characters that I've never met before, like Thor and Rocket Raccoon. Thanos, this is basically his movie, and this was a movie that really needed to deliver Thanos because we've been building up to him since the Avengers, and they did it in spades. This is Thanos' film, and you are happy with that because this is such a cool, interesting, sinister character that he just glues your eyes to the screen every single time that he's on. And he's one of those villains where even though he has this psychotic plan, his justification for it makes sense. Those make for the best villains. Villains that don't feel like they're the villains, and there's actually pieces of their mindset that you can kind of clue into a little bit. You get to the end, and I'll try not to spoil it, I guess, if you haven't seen Infinity War. I don't know why you're watching this list, but when it gets to the final conclusion of what happens, the snap, for me, that is where the film doesn't have as much impact for me personally as it has for others, because with certain characters' fates being revealed in the end of this film, it didn't have any sense of finality to me, because certain characters I was like, well, they've already announced their film, so they're coming back. Well, they're obviously not going to die because that character's wildly popular. Like, I didn't have any like gutted reaction to when people started to disappear at the end. Fuck it. If you haven't seen Infinity War, you shouldn't be watching this list. When the dusting happens, when Spider-Man dusts, when Black Panther dusts, when Winter Soldier dusts, I didn't believe it. I was like, no, they're coming back in the next film. This is bullshit. So I was fine with it. It was a good ending to the story. It didn't make me mad by any means, but I just didn't have that emotional response to it that it seems like a lot of people did, where they were like in shock and had to watch Endgame immediately, but had to wait a year. I was fine. I was like, they're coming back. That ending's not staying. So that's the only thing for me that just makes Infinity War drop from maybe 1 or 2 spots that it would have been if I had had like a real emotional response to it to where it is now. Still a phenomenal film though. Number 5 is Captain America Civil War. Cap versus Iron Man. This movie had a lot to live up to. It's basically an Avengers film titled as a Captain America film, but it is very Captain America centric with the story and with the focus, so it does earn the title of a Captain America film. This is just a great sequel overall for building the characters of Iron Man and Captain America and kind of evolving their relationship and their clashing a little bit, because it's one of those films where you basically have a divide. You have 2 different sides and you're forced to pick a side as a viewer for who you want to see prevail. And it's really difficult because both sides have ideologies that you totally understand and agree with to certain degrees. And it's heartbreaking seeing certain characters go against other characters. When you see Cap and you see Iron Man looking like they're about to battle to the death, you're like, no, you don't want either one of them to lose. You don't want either one of them to die. You don't want either one of them to win. Beyond that, just the introduction of Black Panther was phenomenal. I think he's actually better in this than his original film. So I think his introduction was phenomenal. I think that the introduction of Spider-Man was handled really well. The airport sequence is one of the greatest sequences in comic book history. That whole thing is awesome. I think that the villain of Zemo is a very underrated villain in the MCU because he's just this guy pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Could you take him out of the movie would be exactly the same and be fine? Sure, but he's still a really good villain because he's not this mustache twirling, super powered, world dominating, typical villain that we've seen a lot in the MCU. He's just a guy with a lot of trauma that has been brought by inadvertently by the Avengers, and he wants to get back at them, and he gets back at them by just pulling strings and making them go against themselves. And I think he's utilized very well in the storyline. So Civil War, just an awesome sequel all around. Number 4 is the original Avengers. This movie had a lot to prove, and it proved all of it in spades. This was the first time we got to see a team-up movie like this. This was the first time that we really saw the potential of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is the first time we got character interactions between Thor and Captain America and Iron Man and Black Widow and the Hulk. It was the first time we saw Hulk since his original films. I mean, there's so many things about this that could have fallen flat on its face, and this movie just knocked it out of the park. The only small negative that I even had to say with the Avengers is I don't like the way Captain America's suit looks. It just looks very costumey, whereas in Winter Soldier, in the first Avenger, and Civil War, and the following Avengers films, they realized the suit much, much better. So that's the one element where I'm like, damn, Cap looks a little goofy with that helmet. But small negative in the grand scheme of things. Action sequences, phenomenal. Third act especially, phenomenal. Loki being the main villain was utilized very well. The introduction at the end of Thanos and, the whole post-credit scene and what we're supposed to expect for the next decade of films and everything, all that was great. All the character interactions and the comedy, especially written by Joss Whedon, is sharp. Like when the whole, doth mother know you weareth her drapes? Like lines like that, classic. The Avengers is just one of the greatest comic book films ever made, bar none. All right, here we are, top 3. Number 3 is Guardians of the Galaxy. This is a film that I love unabashedly. I had no faith in it. I had no interest in it. I had no fucks to give about Guardians of the Galaxy when they were talking about it. I, like a lot of people, was saying, that's gonna be Marvel's first flop. Nobody is gonna care about space people. And I was proven so wrong, because Guardians of the Galaxy is not only one of the best MCU films, it's one of the best comic book films, period. And even if you look at it as just like a sci-fi film, like Star Wars or something like that, it's just great standing alone for that. The characters of the Guardians of the Galaxy is across the board perfect. From Quill to Drax to Rocket to Gamora, I mean, they're all great. Even Groot. I am Groot. The only thing you can say the whole damn movie, and he's one of the best parts of it. The interaction between them, the struggle while kind of growing to be a tight-knit little group, that's awesome. The villain of Ronan, I really like him as a villain. Yondu as being kind of like this side thorn in the side of Quill. All of that is great. All the world building of like the cosmic side of the MCU, the Nova Corps, all that stuff. This movie is just great, start to finish. Very little, if nothing negative to say about it. Every single time I watch it, I have a blast with it. I laugh. I love it to death. And it is my number 3. Now we're at the top 2. If you guys have done process of elimination, you know that the movie that I have had at number 1 for every single ranking that I have ever done, that I have said numerous times is not only my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe film, but my favorite comic book film of all time. That is still yet to be named, as well as the newcomer Avengers Endgame. Yes, it is that damn good that it has made it up into my top 2. Drum roll, please. Number 2 is Avengers Endgame. Not quite good enough for number 1 yet, but number 2, absolutely. And I'm not somebody who does this hardly ever with a new film, especially talking about 22 films. I am never one to get so hyped and excited about a new film that I just keep putting the new film up in the top 5 because it's the newest one. I never do that. Avengers Endgame is that damn good. This movie hit me on so many emotional levels throughout the entire runtime. It hit me and it made me hold back tears at certain points. It hit me and made me jump for joy at certain points. There was 3 or 4 different times in the movie, one especially where it took all of my composure not to jump out of my seat and go, yeah! This movie has everything I could have possibly wanted from an Avengers film, from the follow-up to Infinity War, from kind of a wrap-up of the 11 years of MCU that we've seen so far. and it does pretty much all of it perfect. Like I said in my spoiler-free review, and I'm not going to spoil it here, there is 2 characters that I don't feel like were utilized very well. That was a big disappointment, but everything else that they did makes up for it in spades. Great action sequences, great drama, great follow-up for the ramifications of the events of Infinity War, kind of scaling down the focus a bit because of the events of the end of Infinity War and having to force the focus on less characters made the film flow a lot better and made the character interactions flow a lot better. Captain America, how he gets a lot more focus here than he did in Infinity War, and they utilize him awesome. Like Iron Man the same way, even though he got quite a bit of focus in Infinity War. Everything about this film to me was just knocking it out of the park left and right. I have not been this happy, this pumped, and this excited to see it again for an MCU film in years. Probably since Winter Soldier, to be honest. So yeah, I struggled with it for a while. I was like, do I really need to put it that high? Do I need to sleep on it? Do I need to see it again? Do I need to like put it low and then later on bump it up? But no, like this is a film where I literally walked out of it so pumped and so emotionally hit by the things that they did that I could not forgive myself if I didn't put it this high. It's not quite number 1 for me yet, as I will say, and I will tell you why when I get to that, but number 2 out of 22 films, yes, Endgame is that damn good. But number 1, still reigning supreme, and it still is my favorite comic book film of all time, is Captain America Winter Soldier. I watched the 4K just a couple days ago. It's out at Best Buy if you guys are not privy to that info. All 3 of the Captain America films have a badass 4K steelbook exclusive to Best Buy. So I watched Winter Soldier, and rewatching it, yes, every reason why I love this film, I still love it, and I still love it even more. Everything regarding Steve Rogers, his moral conflict with S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra, everything as far as the action sequences, like the elevator sequence, the fights with Winter Soldier, the ship at the beginning, the little siege of the ship, and he goes against GSP. All that stuff is just some of the greatest action you'll ever see in not only a comic book film, but an action film. The interaction with him and Black Widow, everything surrounding Nick Fury and his action sequences, the drama and the action involved with the Winter Soldier and his reveal, Alexander Pierce and the reveal of Hydra kind of taking over S.H.I.E.L.D. from within. Everything about this film to me is flawless. Like, this is not only a great action film, it's not only a great comic book film, it's not only a great MCU film, it's a great espionage film. It knocks it out of the park. This was the film that I went, wow, the MCU is not fucking around. Not that they were ever really dicking around a whole lot, but when I saw Winter Soldier, that just raised my expectations and my love for the MCU to a new echelon. And it's still there. Will Endgame eventually dethrone it? I don't think so, but time will tell. But God, The Winter Soldier is just a movie that I could talk about ad nauseum. I love every single frame of this movie. I think it's flawless, and it's still my favorite comic book film of all time, and my number 1 MCU films. Number 1, Captain America, The Winter Soldier. Well, that's it, guys. That is my new updated ranking for the MCU. What about you? What is your ranking? List them down below. You can do a top 5 or top 10, or you can do all 22 if you want, and give me some reasons. Don't just put lists, because those are very boring to scroll through. But tell me down below. I will give you the same warning that I gave in my Avengers Endgame. Please do not be a dickhole and spoil the movie down below. I don't want to see any comments about things that happen in the 3rd act or major reveals, and I will ban you from my channel if I do see you doing it. Save that shit for the spoiler review tomorrow or later on today, however I get to it. Don't be a dickhole. Rule number 1, don't be a dickhole. So, beyond all that, like and share this video. Please hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. Check out the video description below for social media links like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spreadshirt for Cody Leach t-shirts, other merchandise designed by the great Woody Bowen, and my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel, help this channel grow, and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only, such as exclusive commentaries. I'm going to be doing one later on this afternoon for Dream Warriors, digital Blu-ray copy codes that I give away to them every single week, review requests, all that cool stuff. That's all exclusive to Patreon, so check that out, guys. And if you want to check out some more of my videos, including my spoiler-free review of Endgame, previous rankings, previous reviews of the MCU, you can check all that shit out by clicking right over here.